Recorded on November 14th, 2012 in front of a live internet audience. This week's Design Chat is brought to you by our friends at Etsy. They're the best place to buy and sell all things handmade, vintage, and supplies. This holiday season, give an Etsy gift card. You can customize it, email it, or print it out at home in just a couple clicks. Find out more at Etsy.com.
Hello and welcome to Design Chat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern. On Twitter, I'm at Hoopajube and at Design Chat. Every week, we get together with some of the coolest people from the design community and chat. This week, we have the honor of speaking to Mr. Randy J. Hunt.
Hey, all right, thanks.
Bravo. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. And thanks to Mitch for the recommendation.
Yeah, Mr. Mitch Goldstein, past guest, amazing man of many talents, made another great suggestion to get Randy on, and here he is. My pleasure, good sir, he says in the chat room. All right, in typical Design Chat style, first thing we do is we have the guest sort of do a little brief introduction, who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Sure, so, excuse me. I'm Randy Hunt. I'm the creative director at Etsy.com. I would guess that most people with us now are familiar with Etsy, but maybe if they're not, they should say so in the chat room. And what I do at Etsy as a creative director is lead all of our designers, our design team. And those are both the designers that do what we call product design, which is most of our design team. So they're building, working with the engineering and product management teams to build the site itself, as well as our apps and other experiences online. And then I'm also working with the group that we call our design studio, which is doing brand communications, marketing, design. I do that because I love design and I love Etsy. I've been with Etsy for a few years. And I would say the single biggest thing I've done while at Etsy is grow this design team, really build this team of people in a way that I think works best for Etsy. A group of people with an approach and a set of skills and a set of personalities that I think best serve Etsy's design needs, as well as reflect the way that I think design can and should work for a product like Etsy, for a brand like Etsy.
And that's a design problem in itself, putting the pieces of the puzzle together to make the machine work, right?
Yes, that's accurate. I might take issue with calling it a machine. It is, and in most of my, most of my work anymore, I would say of the last probably 2.5 years, the vast majority of my time is working on these sort of meta design problems, right? Designing a team, if you will, designing ways in which you work together, communicating on behalf of the team, communicating on behalf of the role of design inside the organization, outside the organization, to really, to try to set up situations for other people who I think are better designers than me to get great work done. That's really the goal, to sort of lead by supporting and lead by advocating for what design can offer and does offer, both the process and the talent, but also the people.
Mm-hmm. So I see that you went to the MFA program at SVA. I'm assuming that your background then prior to that was in a more traditional graphic design, yes?
It was, yep. I studied graphic design in undergrad, and then I studied in the MFA design program at SVA, which is often calls itself the designer as author, the designer as entrepreneur, but at its core, its basis is graphic design. And that's what I was doing for several years. I ran a small design studio doing client service design work. Um, and that always included, for me, really since the earliest time I was doing professional design work, um, always included web design or more sophisticated versions of interactive design
Hmm.
as time passed. So in that sense, my entire experience in what I'd call graphic design, um, or my entire experience with design, has kind of been a variety of design sort of disciplines or areas at the same time. They've just always kind of been like clustered together for me.
Um, One of the things that stuck with me, that group you were referring to earlier was Citizen Scholar, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Design studio?
Yes.
Yeah. The name really kind of stuck with me, right? And it kind of got some gears going for me. The word citizen separately, the word scholar, right? In my sort of, when I hear the word citizen, I'm instantly drawn back to eighth grade, poli-sci studies, understanding what it means to be a citizen, what it means to be a good citizen, the responsibilities that you have, your civic duties, right? Understanding how the government works, understanding how to contribute to society, all of that. And then to cross that with the word scholar, sort of raises up the understanding of what the word citizen means, right? So in my sort of pondering about that, the way we treat the word citizen in our understanding of that is that there's responsibilities. You can be a crappy citizen, you can be a good citizen, right? What if we apply that thinking to the word scholar, right? That the thinking that people should be a scholar and the reasons for that. So if you had to list the reasons for being scholar or scholarly, what would they be?
Oh, this is a great question. I mean, first and foremost, I think that uh, the mindset of a scholar, I suppose, is to is not only to constantly learn. I was going to say constantly learn, but to consider the opportunities for learning, or like create the opportunities for learning in the situation, right? So it's about it's not simply like, oh, I learn by doing, or I'm interested in learning this thing, but it is to actually study the thing actively, right? Where learning can happen passively in the sense that there may be an experience and I've learned from it. I think the scholar mindset is I'm going to enter an experience for the purpose of learning, and I will create moments or opportunities within that from which I will learn, and then reflect on those things that I've learned. Uh, the other, for me, like less important in the context of design for me personally, but still like quite important, is what we're doing right now, which is this discussion, the participation in a conversation about the learning, right? Um, about the questions, about the opportunities, about the situations you create for yourself in which to learn. Like there's sort of uh, there's a dialogue that surrounds the core activity that allows you to understand or learn from the more activity, learn from the core activity. Um, and I think that a scholarly approach is one that uh, values that as well. It goes out of its way, right, to participate in that.
Yeah, Mitch Goldstein in the chat room aptly summed it up, learning how to learn, and I think, as a human race, we're still sort of absorbing, the processes that happen internally biochemically, as we age. And I think that's an important subject too, is as you age, as you become an adult and you become a professional, a lot of people have a tendency to shut off the ability to take in new information. They find things that work for them. They become comfortable in those thought patterns, and then they stop the flow, or they stop allowing new information to come in and influence the way that they think and behave. Has that been a challenge for you? And if so, how do you overcome that?
No, I've got it all figured out. It's never been a problem for me. I'm sure it has. And I say I'm sure in that there are probably many situations where it's been a problem for me and I've not been aware of it, or I haven't identified that as the problem. But I think in other places I've either identified it as a problem or as a potential problem and then tried to sort of design it out of the process in a way. I think I've thought about really situations. So interesting how many of these are really have to do with interactions between people, um, but situations that seem suboptimal for getting for great design to happen. And um, I'm seeing your private note here while I'm thinking, distracting.
Sorry.
And
I was asking Andrew for a refill because I downed my first glass of whiskey too fast.
um, I'm trying to I'm making this too complicated. I think that there's a few things that have happened or choices I've made that I think
it's a very complicated subject, and like to really internalize it and to be able to spit out what makes sense to you, because it's going to be different for everybody, right? Everybody's got their own processes. Everybody's got their own limits and ability to understand those limits. But so something we do on this chat. So I would hate for this sort of forum to become this really snooty, upper level sort of, we're really important kind of people kind of thing. That's not my goal at all. But I think it's really important to be honest with yourself and really evaluate how you approach your job as a designer. What motivates you, and why does it motivate? Thanks, buddy. Why does it motivate you, and what totally, what's the outcome of that? So I always like to hear those perspectives from other people, right? Especially from people who are achieving really interesting things like you, right? So I just want to know, so what of as you progress, and you obviously
just lost the last.
Oh, we're having a little bit of lag. Are we
Yep.
caught up yet?
I think so. Yep, we're good.
My question to you is really about your perspectives on, because you did some higher level learning, and there's obviously higher level thinking in that sort of program at SVA. How then you're applying that ability to learn and communicate and evolve into your professional career.
Sure. I'd say the single biggest thing is I've gotten very, very comfortable with the idea that I'm probably wrong. I'm probably wrong most of the time. Yep. Most of the time I'm wrong. Somehow I'll figure it out. And that other people are often wrong, and they will also somehow figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And like these are a few simple, these sound simple. They're really difficult, and they get more difficult the more people you're interacting with, because being wrong is, more or less accepted by different people, right? to different degrees. Being comfortable with being wrong is alarming to some people and comforting to others. Right? And telling people you are comfortable with being wrong, or that you are probably wrong while you are talking to them, is an interesting thing for people. So there's a lot of comfort with failure, I would say, and a lack of concern for what that what the sort of exhaust of that process is, or that like orientation is. Not a lack of concern for failing or what happens if something doesn't go well, but a lack of just sort of blowing out like past expectations or confusions around wrongness, mistakes, correcting those things. That's probably the most important thing. I try to do it with myself all the time, not always, not always flawlessly. And then I try to like make other people comfortable with it for themselves. Um, and then really encourage other people to accept it in other people as well. To say, hey, somebody will come to me and describe something about a design, at Etsy that they didn't like, and I think a really healthy way of sort of responding to that is saying, yes, it's probably not right. Like, it's probably not. It can probably be better.
And you know what? That's definitely a position that um, is healthy in respect not only to design as a whole, but interactive design. You know, because we're still at the infancy in the stages of specifically interactive design. What works best, as far as putting out an interface that everyone. Oop, I guess he was done answering questions. We just lost Randy. I don't know what happened, but we'll try to get him back shortly. In the meantime, I want to remind people who are watching, we can ask questions. Log in if you can and ask text questions. We've got one sitting here from Mitch Goldstein that we'll take as soon as Randy gets back. We must have lost his connection. In the meantime, I'm not seeing him in there. Mitch, if you're around, if you've got a webcam, I'm going to invite you to be a co-host for a second. So I've done that. So if you see the invite pop up, he has declined the invitation to co-host. Oh, he must not be wearing his face tonight. He doesn't want to be seen on camera. Mitch, what gives? Sorry, dude, feeling craptacular tonight. All right, well, yeah, no makeup. I won't force you to do it. I just thought I'd take a chance on it. Just craptastic. Okay, well, time to fill some time. Let's do this. Let's go to the upcoming guests page. And I did not do my due diligence and write down who we're talking to next week. There it is, Jason Pimental, another Mitch Goldstein suggestion. He's a web strategist, designer, technologist, speaker, writer, teacher, and irrepressibly curious about almost everything. He's got a website called thinkingandpencil.com. You guys should check that out. It looks to be a very interesting conversation. So Jason Pimental, look him up. All right, let's get back and see if we can see Randy. I don't see him back in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to chat. Yeah, refresh maybe. He says, I lost you there, chat. I don't know what happened. Vocal is acting bitchy tonight. Okay, he's back in. He's in the chat room. Randy Hunt, I am inviting you to be a co-host. It happens. There he is.
Sorry about that.
Sounds like he's gone. What happened?
Hopefully we ended right after I said something really smart and just before I started rambling.
We should have just stopped the chat right there, right? Ended on a good note.
Done. Great. So very comfortable with being wrong.
Mitch says it's very poignant. All right, so let's get off some of the philosophical crap. Let's get to the actual application stuff. I thought it was really interesting that before you were even at Etsy, you co-founded something called Supermarket, right? Which is also an interface where artists can sell their products online. So why don't you share a little bit of the history on Supermarket?
Sure. Well, I started Supermarket with another guy named Ryan Dusing, and he was actually a client of mine at the design studio at Citizen Scholar. He had another business that was curated design products. When it started, a lot of products kind of from a Brooklyn design scene, a lot of Pratt graduates, and it was a traditional business e-commerce, but in the sense that they bought wholesale, sold retail, held inventory, picked products off a shelf, put them in a package, and we were doing sort of brand marketing design, things like that for that site. It was called Elsewheres. It's not around anymore, but it was fairly ahead of the curve, sort of in that space and selling those kinds of products online. There was maybe one or two like comparable sites, and what they really did great was find cool products kind of before they hit. There's numerous things that they sold first on that site that later got picked up by Target or sold in the MoMA store or things like that. So they were great at identifying stuff. They're also great at getting press, getting these items in like gift guides and shopping magazines or on cool blogs and things like that. And they're really looking at growing that business and realizing the things that they did well, the things that they did, that they were sort of uniquely positioned with, inventory management, dealing with that part of a physical inventory business wasn't the thing at all. It was like finding the cool stuff, bringing the cool stuff together, presenting it to people. And when we realized that and then sort of went through what it would take to either evolve their business into that or do something else, we really decided to go into business together. We started a new company. We, built, launched, marketed, curated, promoted supermarket, together for about 3 years. And then we subsequently got into building other software products for a similar audience of people. And where Elsewheres was an e-commerce company that they were running. SuperCorp, the company that started Supermarket, really became a software development company more than anything else. It was that Supermarket was our most visible product, and it also involved retail, like online retail. So there's a lot of shopping, a lot of marketing happening there.
Well, this was one of the subjects I was kind of leading into before we got cut off, in that, thinking about design in the infancy of interactive design, but even more so as it impacts business, e-commerce, right? That's a whole other study in human interaction, buying patterns, searching patterns, supply and demand, the physical requirements of having to store and ship products, just like you were describing. Describe some of the growing pains that, in understanding e-commerce, specifically e-commerce design, like the pillars, what are the fulcrums of e-commerce design that you would go through in starting a business that was so on the front, the leading edge. Not a lot of these things had really existed before.
Sure, it's interesting. Well, it's easier to say that in hindsight. You're right. At the time, who knows? We built the thing, right? And I certainly developed a certain methodology or orientation to building web products, based on some things that other people would talk about, and then a lot of experimentation. I would say, to be completely honest, we never, until much later in the life of that product, I never thought about it as uniquely e-commerce design or anything like that. I would say I was probably less thoughtful, or not sort of as critical during the process of the nature of what we were doing. We were just in it, right? I wasn't thinking like, wow, this is something, pretty new. There's not a lot of examples of this, and or like this is really new for a person with my experience to be doing, or anything like that. It was more like, oh, we've got this new business, and we need to I gotta pay the bills and find more people and find cool stuff and talk about it. Very much in the mechanics of it, of running that business. Looking at it after the fact more, and certainly as I look at things at Etsy all the time, I would say that there's a big part of designing for e-commerce, right? Or any big sort of web platform, web product, or any of the stuff. And you can apply these principles at almost any scale. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens that's not in that site. that affects the overall user experience, that affects your perception of that brand, that affects, that influences whether those things work well or not, right? Like the speed in which you receive something you buy online, like matters a lot in how you feel about that thing. Um, and in both, in supermarket and at Etsy, we don't have direct control over that. We're not the person shipping the item, but that's like one thing in the big flow. If you were to map out every step in the flow of like, seeing somebody tweet some cool thing, clicking the link, ending up on Etsy, never been there before, you kind of wrap your head around what Etsy is, you click around, you find another item, you add it to your cart, you go through all this stuff. Like at some point, part of that flow, the beginning of that flow doesn't exist on Etsy, and it's kind of, outside of your control. And the end of that flow is like a box coming in the mail, potentially waiting for you to pick it up at the UPS place because you weren't there when it arrived, and you opening that thing up. Like there's a lot of parts of that experience that aren't, how do you tune a checkout funnel? And that's a hard one to figure out when you're in it, but you kind of see it. You can see it when you back out a little bit. Like how do you address those other problems or opportunities? Sometimes there are tools you design for people to do those things well. Sometimes it's a lot of communication, both like inside your company or to your customers or with your customers, to do those things really well and make them like add up to be part of the experience.
Yeah, you don't think about that side of it a lot, that you guys, you're developing this sort of web product for people to purchase things through, but you also have to work with the people who are creating the things. And we're just sort of segueing really quick here into Etsy and how specifically Etsy works. How the people creating the things and how they should market their product to the people who want to buy the things, right?
Right.
And it's this great thing that's happening in commerce right now because of the internet. The makers can get their products to the people who need them or want them, or want to gift them to other people. So yeah, I mean that's a really sort of interesting angle to think about. When you're designing this whole interaction, there's it's not just the end result that consumers know. It's how the makers of the products need to actually get them up on the market. So I would imagine that you have to do some, like you just said, your communication and relationship building with the makers of the products. What's there in terms of that? Is there like a separate site or some other community or forum that people talk and share ideas on, and how to get their creations, the best way to get their creations to people who want to buy them?
Sure. So there are what we call Etsy teams, which is a great thing. They're sort of self-organized groups of people, usually around geography or certain topics or shared interest, and people communicate and talk there. Sharing tips, marketing tips, ways of making things, right? How to ship certain types of products well. Like let's say it's fragile glass. Like how do you deal with shipping that? Maybe it's the first time somebody gets an order from someone in Germany. How do you deal with like preparing, for German customs? All sorts of things like that. So people talk about those things in forums. We also offer email support, right? And over time, we've built up quite a library of like knowledge-based articles about very, very specific support issues. So these things sometimes come up. There's also sort of a knowledge base where people can browse through that information. A lot of these things happen face-to-face in the real world as well. So like we host workshops, Etsy teams host workshops, Etsy teams host workshops with content we've provided them. And then these things happen on blogs, websites. I don't know, I paid $3 for an ebook that somebody was selling on Amazon that was like, 101 tips for running your shop on Etsy. So this information is available in a lot of places, at varying degrees of depth and specificity. I think one of the biggest challenges is to deal with the nuance in these things. There's some general rules you can tell people all the time. beautiful photography is going to work better than, crappy photography. Here's how to take beautiful photographs. Right? We give some tips. We have some great videos that talk through some of these common things, giving people tips. What is much, much harder is something like a letterpress printer, and answering a question for them about whether they should, how much inventory should they print and hold in advance, or how much should they kind of wait till the demand hits and then make it, and what are the implications of those things? One is maybe having a longer lead time in shipping. The other is sort of some more capital investment or the need to like hold and organize inventory. And those are very real questions for people who are trying to start and grow a small business, but they're much, much more specific, right? Or
Sure.
like the questions about how you do a good job marketing, vintage housewares versus sort of newly made fashion where you're trying to be like on season and on trend, are like two
So where do you
very,
guys
very
draw the
different
line?
things.
Because of that specificity, where do you draw the line at, we can help you do X, Y, and Z, but we're not touching A, B, and C.
Really, so it's interesting. I mean, we tend to put our energy towards the things that skew probably more general, but there is no hard line. Um,
Did you type that?
no, but I'm a junior. Maybe that's my dad,
Is it really?
which would be
That'd be
kind of
hilarious.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we need to stop for a second and acknowledge that because here's something really, really interesting happened last week because of a technical fail that we had. The audio wasn't working like we were talking about before, so we had to do the entire chat over our cell phones, and I put Eric Marinovich on speakerphone and held it up to the microphone. And because of that, at some point it was brought up we should call your mom, and we actually patched his mom into the chat. So if that's actually your dad, it would be awesome to talk to him right now. Because I want to make it like a trend on DesignChat where we talk to the proud
That's
parent
awesome.
of some amazing design person who's achieved interesting things.
That's great. He's not. Maybe it is a software bug. He's not responding. The line though, it we probably lean more general. Certainly when we have some events, we would do things like live shop critiques. So people from our merchandising team would sort of use a shop as an example, and a person would volunteer, and they'd go through and talk about all these different ways to improve it, from listing titles to descriptions to pricing to photography. And using an example is usually quite good for other representative. The specifics are good for other people that have similar products or similar shops, and then the general lessons are, applicable more widely. Really,
Mr.
where we draw
Hunt,
the line in
Mr. Hunt Senior, if you're listening, call your son right now, and he's going to put you on speakerphone so you can say hi to the DesignChat community. And we want to hear about your son's experiences, trials, and tribulations growing up as a young creative. So if he calls, you got to put him on speakerphone, Randy.
I will. All right, I got my phone here.
Nice.
This reminds me of one interesting thing I've been doing as new designers join our team. I usually
Yeah.
send them like a little interview and just some fun questions, and just kind of introduce them to other people in the company. And one of the things I've been doing is asking people to show me their the home screen on their phone, with no other commentary, but just
up to the
home screen on the phone.
the camera. Let's see, what do you got
Oh,
there?
well, now we can see that Dad's calling.
Oh, pick it up.
Hey, Dad. All right, I'm going to put you on speakerphone, and then maybe Ryan will ask you some questions here. All right.
I love this.
All right. Are you there, Dad?
Yeah, Mr. Hunt, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is going to be a new segment on DesignChat where we talk to the proud parents of interesting design people who have achieved great things in the world of design. So maybe Randy will have to repeat the question, but my question to you is, what's the first thing that you remember your son doing as far as in a creative endeavor that impressed you?
Well, I'm sure his mom would remember things from school, but I probably remember most from his early college days when he, I don't know, he was bringing home designed stuff, pictures and things he did in school and in college, and I was just really impressed. I never knew he had the talent for drawing, etc. And I was really surprised.
So is there something that stood out in any of those moments that that kind of showed his level of interest, or something that he achieved at a young age that sticks out?
Well, probably. I tell you, just the other day, I pulled
Oh no.
a CD out that he had designed the cover for back in high school, and I was looking at it, and I was really surprised. At the time, I didn't realize how good it was. I'm looking at it now, and I'm going, this kid was in high school and designed this, and simply produced it and marketed it, and it's just I'm really proud of it. And I was just surprised I didn't know it then.
Hey, thanks, Dad.
As a promo for today's chat, I don't know if you saw it, Randy, but I did a dramatic reading of your Twitter feed and recorded it, and I put it out on SoundCloud. And in one of those tweets, you were thanking your dad for having served in the military. So I just wanted to call that out. It being, Veterans Day this past weekend or Monday. Just that it was really neat to see that you calling out, and thanking your dad for his service.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate that. And I appreciate my dad's service, of course.
That's great. Mr. Hunt, I want to thank you for joining us on Design Chat tonight. It's always cool to hear the insight from the parent of somebody who does something cool. So we're going to end it real quick, end the phone call, but thank you for calling in. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Bye, Dad.
That's awesome.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I'd started this record label with a coworker of mine. We put out about 8 different records, and I designed most of them. But then we, of course, we had to market them and sell them and get like distribution and do what we could. We never made money. I mean, 8 records later, we were basically back where we started. But we always sort of, just when we had enough money to put out something else from selling, things prior, we'd like put out another record. Which was an awesome experience. I think for me, like design and starting businesses have always also been kind of tangled up. They haven't, when I was doing client service design, it was in like a design studio I started. And like in every other situation, like the design I've been doing professionally or as a hobby has always been in the context of something I've started myself until this point when I'm working with Etsy.
I was going to ask that, right? It's, so from the very young age in high school, you were able to connect the dots between I can create something visually and then, in turn get money for it, which then supports me, which lets me continue doing the thing that I enjoy. Were those dots that you connected sort of consciously, or was that sort of an unconscious, it just was natural to you and you just started doing it sort of thing?
Certainly I started doing it, and I think it was unconscious in a way. I wonder if there's like a timing thing, just sort of at the point at which I was growing up, like technology we had access to, what was kind of, I don't know, the music I was particularly interested in. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but was kind of off the radar. Like a lot of the people might have been like 5-10 years older than me, but they were putting out their own records. They were like designing their own t-shirts, screen printing them themselves. And so all of that stuff kind of came together. It's like they were kind of making a mini brand. They had to like build a following of people to push that stuff out to. They were making it all themselves. You had to make like you had to make some money off of it or think about how to make money off of it because you couldn't just like take money out of your pocket and keep dumping it directly into stuff like that, like even if you wanted to. And I
Sure.
think that just seemed like seemed like a real natural intersection of things. And it wasn't actually until I designed a few things, maybe even several things. I mean, like flyers, posters, like a couple CDs, stuff like that, where I was like, oh, design is a thing. Like, I see people do design professionally. Um, and that's when I started to think about it more. I mean, it was like after I had gone to college, even though I was like doing design a lot, I wasn't like,
Mhm.
I'm going to be a graphic designer. Um, I kind of realized somewhere along the way that people did that um, as a discipline. Like there was something there. So it kind of came out of this other like mixed up pool of things that involved like starting stuff and marketing and learning about business things. They're all sort of jumbled up together.
And what's great about that is because you can really trace back your evolution of how you learned certain skills, skill sets, right? What frames the way that you think about business today. Even though at the time, at that young age, you probably weren't using all the business terminology that you use today. They were still the same sort of human behavior patterns, right? The same
Mm-hmm.
ones that apply to the higher level thinking, the big business that everybody talks about. But at the core, it's the most simple supply and demand. People want stuff. Some people can make stuff, and again, that's carried through your entire career. Through the supermarket to Citizen Scholar, now to Etsy. You can draw a path. Like your career sort of path is very linear in a sense. In a time, and I
Yeah.
find that interesting in a time where you look at people's resumes, you looked at people's LinkedIn's, and it's 6 months here, 8 months there, 2 years tops here, and they're hopping around not only from job to job, but from sort of career to career. So
Yep.
for you, I'm curious about why has your path been so focused for you?
Um, you know, I oof, I'm not sure. In one way, I'd say I was lucky enough to just stumble into the right intersection of things. Um, that feels like one answer. I would say another is that I'm I've learned about myself that I'm able to frame my orientation to a set of problems or a set of sort of conditions in a way that I can find like quite deep satisfaction in it, even if it was.
Did we lose Randy? I think we might have lost Randy. He's paused. He might have dropped off. Randy, no, says Parker Gibson. I think we might have lost him. We lost there too. We've got a text question sitting here from Mitch that I definitely want to get to, but, oh, is he back? Nope, crap, gone. We'll get to that. I want to remind you guys to ask questions. If you're not signed in, sign in so you can ask questions. We're almost near to the end of our hour. It's 8:48. We've got about 12 minutes left of our chat here. It was dramatic. He was totally frozen in time, like Han Solo in Carbonite, or like Steve Jobs in Carbonite. Look at that. That's an iPhone case you guys wish you had. That's right. So when we get him back, I'm going to transition from Etsy out. Before his dad called, he was going to show us what's on his iPhone. I'm going to see if we can get an app recommendation, and then we'll get to the question from Mitch Goldstein. But in the meantime, you guys, plenty of time to think about questions to ask Mr. Randy J. Hunt. Let's see if we can get him back. Coming back. Sorry about the interruptions, my friends. We will get back on it. Andrew is predicting that Randy's app recommendation will be OmniFocus. Or is that, Andrew, is that your app recommendation? And guys in the chat room, if you have an app that you have been using the shit out of lately, that's my first curse word of the night. We're going raw. Throw it in there. Let's talk about it. I want to hear what you guys are using, because that's a cool thing about doing these, having these smartphones, is that it's not just the same thing for the whole 2-year contract. You get new interactions. Hold on a second. I think he's coming back. So we've got Carmageddon, letterpress. I've heard a lot about letterpress lately, and Randy, letterpress. We were going to ask you about that when you come back on. Let me send the invite. There's 2 Randy Hunts in here. I don't know which one is the dad and which one is the son. So I'm going to invite the first one. Let's see if it works. Okay, well, I'll go figure it out. That one declined, so that's got to be the dad. So I'm going to invite the second one. It's so meta, that's right. Mitch, I don't know why, but your chats are coming through in triple and double time. I don't know. You're back. You're live. I was concerned.
Hey. Yeah, sorry about that. Not sure what's happened.
That's fine. As you saw, we were just getting into some app recommendations before your dad called. You were about to show us your phone, so let's see that home screen. What your go-to apps are there, and then maybe your recommendation that you were saying in the chat room.
Well, I was just getting excited about anyone mentioning letterpress. I don't usually get pulled into games so much. Not that I don't enjoy playing games, but not from some sort of social interaction. And that's the first time that I've really been deep sucked in. I was like, new game, new game, new game. Sit on my couch for an hour playing 20 simultaneous games. That's the first time that's ever happened, and I liked it. Here's what we got. Let's see.
So you got the camera, you got
so
the
photos.
It's hard to see.
Yeah, camera, photos, map. There's so here's the I would say the most maybe surprising and important ones are OmniFocus. I'm a huge OmniFocus fan. Use it on all my devices, synced across them. It's my primary way of manage my thinking.
I am not
really
familiar with OmniFocus, so give me an overview. What does it do?
OmniFocus is a task management software, a glorified to-do list, I would say, but it's really built around the getting things done methodology, and it's interesting. So it's made by the Omni Group, the same people that make OmniGraffle and OmniOutliner, OmniPlan, all those things. And then, like most of their products, the actual UI design I find pretty awful, but the user experience is really great. Product is what it does. I'd say the closest thing is Things, which has a far better design experience, but is not as feature rich. But you basically tag every task. There's the concept of an inbox. You add things to an inbox, and then you go through and review your inbox and file those things away based on when they're due, if they have a due date, who you need to talk to do them, where you're going to do them. It has geofencing, it's location aware, so you show up at home and you can switch to your home context, and it shows you all your tasks that are due today while you're at home.
Oh, that's neat.
If it was not for OmniFocus, even more things, I would forget even more things than I need.
So when you send that as an interview question for a potential employee, what have been some of the more surprising things that you see on those home screens?
Oh, no, I usually send this when we've hired someone to introduce them to the company. Although I do often ask people when I'm interviewing them, what products they use regularly. And sometimes I ask them, I haven't asked this one in a while, but what is a product you use all the time, even though you don't like the design of it? Because I think this is a really, I like the complexity email. Right? I like the complexity there. I mean, there's some people's comfort with ambiguity around those things. Sometimes, some designers can focus so much on the design. And I think it's really interesting to think about if a product solves a use for you, even though it's terribly designed. or seems like it's terribly designed. And in many cases, the answer is yes. Sometimes you're forced to use things for other, for other reasons. But
Eva in the chat room just noted that OmniFocus app is $20. Is that true? Is that and if so,
yeah, they don't
is
mess.
it worth
They don't mess
$20?
around, man. Omni's been around. They've been making software for the Mac like forever. And interestingly, they have not followed on to the sort of race to the bottom 99-cent model in the store. They charge like they've always been. I think it gives them a smaller audience, but it's also a pretty loyal audience. I actually worry about the dollar thing, because it's waiting for a hit. It's like pop songs. It can totally work, but a small like software development company off charging people $1 for something, I think is pretty difficult. So I don't mind paying for it. What I actually found, I bought on the desktop first, which is like even more expensive. It's crazy, but I tried OmniFocus 2 other times and didn't commit to it. You really have to commit to its methodology, and one of the reasons I finally committed was like, you spent $75 on this thing. Like, you better stick with it for a few weeks and see if it works. And at the end of those 2 weeks, I was like, man, please let me give you $20 to use this on my phone.
We're almost near the end of our chat already. I can't believe it. It's one of those that just absolutely flew by. It's 8:56 already, for Christ's sake. So we've got one question here sitting in the queue from the Mitch Goldstein, who wants to know, I'm of course dying to know your thoughts on regretsy.com.
Well, it's not the first time I've heard that question. Mitch, come up with better ones. No, just kidding. I think that
First start with what is regretsy for people that don't know.
I see Mitch saying he's off tonight. Well, you can go there and check it out. There's a website where this woman, and I believe now she has a couple of editors, are basically finding like the most ridiculous stuff on Etsy, like the craziest products and things like that. They're often either like, really strange and awkward photos, like weird, dark, very sort of like dark products, things that like you would never imagine people ever wanting to buy or sell. Sometimes things that are like highly sexualized. And I don't know, I think the whole thing's pretty funny. Like, I think her voice is pretty funny. What I think is most interesting is that, she has made a book based on this concept. Like, a person has made a career riffing on, sort of making a joke and a parody of things inside the ecosystem, which to me points to the scale and influence of that Etsy's reach, like more than anything else. Like, now sometimes they do things that are maybe mean or make an Etsy seller feel bad or something like that, and I certainly I wouldn't endorse that. That doesn't get me excited. But I think in general, the idea of like meta conversations about content on Etsy is like awesome. It's the same way it was like awesome when Etsy was a clue on Jeopardy or an answer in the Washington Post crossword puzzle. Like, all these things are sort of these like little moments where you're like in this pop culture dialogue as a thing, and that's good. Like, if we're doing, if we're being as influential as we want to be, we'll be blowing past things like Regretsy, and hopefully people will be mentioning us in campaign stump speeches and in meetings at the World Economic Forum, like that.
Well, that's what's great
that's
about
right.
your answer. What totally excites me about that, and I think is the most interesting about that is the attitude towards something like that. So you've got companies out there who are very controlling over their image. The Lucasfilms of the world, who anybody who speaks up about that, intellectual property, and then makes money on it, gets squashed, gets killed. Lawyers come screaming with briefcases, and they shoot bombs at you and threats until you stop doing what you're doing. But instead, the opposite reaction to that is to embrace it, do the Tai Chi move, right, and take the blow and take it for what it's worth, and embrace what's happened, cultivate dialogue, allow the dialogue to happen. So also you don't look like the asshole, right? You don't look like the person who's squashing other people's opportunities, and that it sort of raises the level of community, yes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. There's no,
By the way, thanks, Mitch, for the question. You're not that off.
yeah. I mean, it's funny. I think there's a, yeah, it's become a great question. There's, oh gosh, what's his name? Who's the senator from Massachusetts? Why can't I think of his name now?
Chat
At any
room,
rate,
Senator
there's
from
something I'm going to
Massachusetts. Somebody Google for us. Chat room is always reliable
see.
when it comes to my brain farts.
Barney Frank. Barney Frank is who I'm thinking of. I saw him giving a talk once, and he was talking about sort of this misunderstanding we have, or his misuse of the phrase, the freedom of speech. And you'll see why this is important tonight. And he was saying that really the freedom of speech is, or like, you know, defending the freedom of speech is defending the rights of people who disagree with you to say that they disagree with you. Like, and if you're willing to do that, then you really believe in what it represents, right?
Exactly.
And people like believe that it's perfectly okay to criticize something that we're doing, or to do things that riff on it, right? I mean, there's some lines in the sand, like you shouldn't do things that hurt us, right? But I think that's right. Like it's perfectly acceptable for people to form an opinion about these things, or project an opinion about them. Sometimes they're may not be the opinion they really have, but it's the sort of character they take about them, and the opinions they express sort of through that character, and I think that's perfectly fine.
Well,
we have
reached the end of our hour here. It is 9 o'clock, and we need to wrap it up for the night. Randy, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us, to answer questions, to just be present, right, and participate in the design community. Thank you for doing that.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. It was a fun time.
Everybody, and your dad. Good job, son, in the chat room. I love it. That was so cool. I'm going to try that every week to try and get the parent of who we're talking to on, because that was awesome. Thank you, Mr. Randy Hunt Sr. for doing so. I want to let everybody know, I mentioned it earlier while we were waiting for you to come back. Next week, we're talking to Jason Pimental, also a suggestion from Mr. Mitch Goldstein. Thank you. Because booking is always a challenge with these things. Very, very interesting person who is a strategist, designer, technologist, speaker, writer, teacher, and irrepressibly curious about almost everything, which is perfect for our show. He's got a website called Thinking in Pencil, a blog. So check out his thoughts there. We'll get some more information on that on our blog coming up soon. Same time next week, 8 o'clock Central. Here, tell your friends, tell everybody, subscribe on iTunes. We love everybody in the chat room. Thanks back at you, Mitch, for joining us again. And keep up with us on Twitter. At Hoopajube is me. At DesignChat is the show. At Randy J. Hunt is Randy on Twitter. And thank